My father looked me dead in the eye and told me I wasn't welcome at his own retirement party, said I'd embarrass the family in front of his colleagues. 3 days later, I walked into that ballroom anyway, and when the CEO took the microphone, my father's face went white as a sheet. How does a daughter her own father tried to erase end up running the entire company he spent 40 years building? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in March of 2023, while I was reviewing acquisition proposals in my corner office on the 42nd floor. My assistant Karen knocked twice before entering, our signal for family matters. "Your father's on line 3, she said quietly, her expression carefully neutral. Karen had worked with me for 6 years and knew exactly how complicated my relationship with my father was. I set down the Meridian Tech proposal and picked up the phone. "Hi, Dad. Lillian." His voice had that clipped, formal quality he always used with me, like I was a business associate rather than his daughter. "I'm calling about the retirement event on Saturday. My father, Gerald Wilson, was finally stepping down as Chief Operations Officer of Hartwell Industries after 41 years with the company. The retirement gala had been planned for months, a black tie affair at the Grand Monarch Hotel with over 300 guests. I'd received my invitation in January, had my dress picked out, had blocked off the entire evening, despite my packed schedule. "I'll be there at 7, I confirmed, already sensing something was off in his tone. "Actually, that's what I'm calling about." He cleared his throat, that distinctive sound he made when he was about to deliver bad news he'd already rationalized to himself. "Your mother and I have been discussing the guest list, and we think it's best if you don't attend." The words hung in the air like a slap. I set down my pen very carefully. "Excuse me? The event is primarily for senior leadership and their families. It's going to be quite formal, very traditional. We've worked hard to make sure everything reflects well on the family name." He paused. "Given your recent visibility in the business press and some of the decisions you've made that certain people disagree with, we feel your presence might create uncomfortable situations." I felt that old familiar tightness in my chest, the one that had started when I was 8 years old and realized my father looked at my younger brother Marcus with pride, but looked at me with something closer to disappointment. "Uncomfortable for whom?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Lillian, don't make this difficult." Now his voice carried that edge of irritation. "You know how conservative some of these people are. Your approach to business has been aggressive. The Syntech merger you pushed through last quarter upset a lot of traditionalists. The restructuring of the Pacific Division eliminated positions held by people's friends. And that interview you gave to the Financial Times where you criticized old guard corporate culture, that made waves. I was promoted to executive vice president, specifically because of those decisions," I pointed out. "The board voted unanimously. The board is not the same as the people I've worked alongside for 4 decades. His voice hardened. "These are my colleagues, Lillian, my friends. This party is about celebrating my career, my legacy. It's not the place for you to network or make some kind of statement about new generation leadership. I'm your daughter. And as my daughter, I would hope you'd respect my wishes for my own retirement celebration." The finality in his voice was unmistakable. "Your mother agrees with me on this. Marcus will be there representing the family. That's sufficient." Of course Marcus would be there. Marcus, who worked in product development and kept his head down and never challenged anyone or anything. Marcus, who'd followed Dad's career advice to the letter and played corporate politics like a chess game. Marcus, who Dad had once said, understands how to succeed without making enemies. "Does Marcus know you're uninviting me?" I asked. "I'm not uninviting you. I'm asking you, as your father, to understand that your attendance would create tension at an event meant to honor my career." He was using his reasonable voice now, the one that made you feel like you were being unreasonable for objecting. "Surely you can see that." I looked out the window at the city skyline, at all those buildings full of people making decisions and navigating relationships and trying to prove themselves. Somewhere down there, other daughters were probably getting similar messages from their fathers. "You're too much. Too aggressive, too visible, too successful in ways that make people uncomfortable." "I've already cleared my schedule," I said quietly. "Then use the evening to rest. Lord knows you work too many hours anyway." There was a pause. "This is for the best, Lillian. Trust me." trust him. The man who'd told me business school was unnecessary for women because I'd just end up leaving the workforce anyway. The man who tried to talk me out of accepting the EVP position because it would paint a target on my back. The man who'd never once in my 15 years climbing the corporate ladder told me he was proud of what I'd accomplished. Understood, I said, because there was nothing else to say. Enjoy your party. I hung up before he could respond. Karen appeared in the doorway 2 minutes later with coffee I hadn't asked for, her way of checking on me. Everything okay? Family dynamics, I said, which explained everything and nothing. She nodded and left the coffee on my desk, closing the door softly behind her. I should have been used to it by then. I was 38 years old. I'd been proving myself since college, graduating top of my class from Wharton, spending 3 years at McKinsey, joining Hartwell Industries as a senior analyst, and working my way up through strategy, operations, and divisional leadership. I'd turned around the European division when it was hemorrhaging money. I'd negotiated the Meridian Tech acquisition that expanded our market share by 18%. I'd restructured 3 divisions and saved the company over $200 million in operational costs. And my father still saw me as a liability to his legacy. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my brother's contact. Marcus answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, Lil, what's up? Did Dad tell you he uninvited me from the retirement party? Silence. Then, he didn't uninvite you. He just... Marcus. More silence. Yeah, he mentioned it. Said he thought it would be better for everyone if you sat this one out. And you agreed with him? I didn't... Look, Lil, you know how Dad is. This party is really important to him. He's worked his whole life for this moment, and he wants it to be perfect. Marcus lowered his voice. You have to admit, some of your moves lately have made people nervous. The Syntech thing really ruffled feathers. People thought you were overstepping. I was doing my job. I know that. But Dad's generation, they see things differently. They think you should have consulted more, moved slower, brought people along instead of just executing. He paused. I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying that's where they're coming from. So I should just accept being excluded from my own father's retirement party? I'm not saying that either. Marcus sighed. Look, I'll talk to him, okay? Maybe I can get him to reconsider, but you know how he is once he's made up his mind. I did know. Gerald Wilson was nothing if not stubborn. Don't bother, I said. If he doesn't want me there, I won't force myself into his celebration. Lil, I have to go. Meeting in 5. I hung up and stared at the Meridian Tech proposal on my desk. All those hours of negotiation, all that strategy, all the careful maneuvering to get the deal across the finish line, while maintaining relationships and managing egos. I was good at my job. Exceptional at it, actually. The numbers proved it. The board's confidence in me proved it. But to my father, I was just the daughter who made people uncomfortable. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Your father explained the situation. I hope you understand. It's really for the best. Love you, love you. The words felt hollow, like something you signed at the end of a letter out of obligation rather than emotion. I set the phone face down on my desk and went back to work. The rest of that Tuesday blurred into conference calls and strategic planning sessions. I had a talent for compartmentalizing, a skill I'd developed over years of navigating a corporate world that didn't always welcome women like me, push the personal feelings down, focus on the spreadsheets, the projections, the next deal. It had served me well. By 6:30 that evening, most of the office had cleared out. I stayed, as I usually did, reviewing the quarterly performance metrics for our manufacturing division. The numbers told a story that my father and his generation didn't want to hear. Hartwell Industries needed to evolve, or die. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The industrial machinery market was shifting, and companies that clung to legacy products and old distribution models were hemorrhaging market share to more agile competitors. That's what the Syntech merger had been about. That's what all my aggressive moves had been about. Not making enemies or stepping on toes, but survival. My desk phone rang at 7:15. I almost didn't answer it, but the caller ID showed Robert Chen, Hartwell's CEO. You don't ignore calls from the CEO. Lillian, glad I caught you. Robert's voice was warm but tired. He'd been with Hartwell for 32 years, had worked his way up from regional sales manager to the corner office. Unlike my father, Robert had always treated me as a colleague first, daughter of Gerald Wilson second. You got a minute? Of course, what's on your mind? Actually, I was hoping we could talk in person. Are you still in the building? I am. My office? I've got something I need to discuss with you. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Robert Chen in his corner office on the 45th floor. He'd loosened his tie and had that end-of-day weariness in his eyes that came from too many decisions and not enough sleep. Coffee? He offered. I'm good, thanks. He poured himself a cup from the machine behind his desk and settled into his chair. I'll cut to the chase. The board met this afternoon. Emergency session. My stomach tightened. Emergency board meetings were never good news. Is there a problem with the Meridian integration? I asked. That was the most likely crisis point. Big acquisitions always had turbulence in the first 6 months. No, Meridian's tracking ahead of projections, actually. Robert set down his coffee. This is about succession planning. I waited. Succession planning at the CEO level wasn't my department, though I knew Robert was 63 and had been dropping hints about retirement for the past year. I'm stepping down, Robert said bluntly. End of fiscal year. I've been thinking about it for 18 months, but Barbara's cancer scare last fall made the decision for me. Life's too short, and I want to spend time with my grandkids while I'm still healthy enough to enjoy them. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Robert Chen was the best CEO Hartwell had ever had. The company will miss your leadership. The company will be fine, better than fine, if the board makes the right choice. He leaned forward. They spent 3 hours this afternoon debating my replacement. The search committee has been vetting external candidates for months. Headhunters have presented 8 qualified CEOs from other companies, good people with solid track records. Sounds like you have options. We do. But here's the thing, Lillian. 3 board members, myself included, don't want an external candidate. We want someone who knows Hartwell's culture, understands our market position, and has the strategic vision to take us into the next decade. His eyes locked on mine. We want you. The words hit me like a physical force. For a moment, I couldn't process them. Me, I repeated. You, as CEO. Robert picked up a folder from his desk. I've been watching you for 5 years, Lillian, since you took over European operations and turned that disaster around in 18 months. You don't just execute strategy, you create it. You see around corners. You make hard decisions that other people are too afraid to make, and you get results. My mind was racing. CEO of Hartwell Industries, the company my father had devoted his entire career to. The board is split, Robert continued. 5 members want to bring in someone from outside, someone with CEO experience. They're risk-averse, worried about promoting from within. 6 members, including myself, Patricia Morrison, and David Huang, believe you're ready, that you're not just ready, but that you're exactly what this company needs. 6-5, I said quietly. That's not exactly a mandate. It's enough to make the appointment if we vote today. But I wanted to talk to you first. Robert stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. This isn't going to be easy, Lillian. You'd be the youngest CEO in Hartwell's 87-year history. You'd be the first woman. There are people in this building who won't like it, who'll fight you at every turn. I'm aware. Are you? He turned to face me. Your father is one of them. The air seemed to leave the room. Robert continued, his voice gentle but firm. Gerald has made his position clear to several board members. He thinks you're too young, too inexperienced at the executive level, too aggressive is the word he used. He's been quietly lobbying for Douglas Patterson from Titan Industries. Gerald and Douglas played golf together for 20 years. So that's what this was really about. My father wasn't just uninviting me from his retirement party. He was actively working to prevent me from leading the company he was leaving behind. Gerald doesn't speak for the board, Robert said, and he doesn't speak for me, but I need you to understand what you're walking into. If you take this position, you'll be fighting battles on multiple fronts. External competition, internal resistance, and family dynamics that I frankly don't envy. I thought about that phone call from my father, about Marcus saying I made people uncomfortable, about my mother's hollow, love you text. When do you need an answer? I asked. The board meets Friday morning to make the final decision. I need your answer by Thursday night. Robert sat back down. Lillian, I'm going to tell you something I probably shouldn't. Your father called me yesterday, specifically asked me not to consider you for the CEO role, said it would be bad for you, bad for the company, and bad for the family legacy. The betrayal stung more than I expected. Not because it was surprising, but because some part of me had still hoped that when it really mattered, my father would see me for what I'd accomplished rather than what he feared I represented. What did you tell him? I told him I'd take his input under advisement and that the board would make the decision based on qualifications and strategic fit. Robert's expression softened. I also told him that if he couldn't see what an extraordinary executive his daughter had become, that was his loss, not yours. I felt something crack in my chest, not breaking, but shifting. A small piece of armor I didn't know I'd been carrying. I need to think about this, I said. Fair enough, but think about it from the right perspective. Don't think about whether you're ready. You are. Don't think about whether you deserve it. You do. Think about whether you want it knowing what it's going to cost you. I left Robert's office and walked back to mine in a daze. The 42nd floor was completely empty now, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew working their way through the building. CEO of Hartwell Industries. I pulled up the company history on my laptop, founded in 1938 by Thomas Hartwell as a small machine shop in Cleveland. Grew through the war years, manufacturing components for military vehicles. Expanded in the 50s and 60s into industrial machinery, then diversified in the 80s into automation systems and manufacturing technology. Went public in 1993. Current annual revenue, $4.2 billion. Employees, 18,000 across 6 continents. And my father had spent 41 years helping build it. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph I kept there. Me at my college graduation, flanked by my parents. Mom was beaming. Dad looked serious, formal, like he was at a business function rather than his daughter's achievement. I was 22 in that photo, full of ambition and certainty about my future. I thought he'd be proud when I got into Wharton. He said business school was overrated and I should just start working. I thought he'd be proud when McKinsey hired me. He said consulting was for people who couldn't commit to a real company. I thought he'd be proud when I joined Hartwell and saved the European division. He said I'd been lucky with timing. I thought he'd be proud when they promoted me to EVP. He said I'd made enemies getting there, and now he was actively lobbying against me becoming CEO. At some point, you have to stop trying to earn approval from someone determined not to give it. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Talk to Dad. He won't budge on the party. Sorry, Lil. I really tried. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Thanks for trying. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. None of it was okay. I thought about Robert's question. Did I want this knowing what it would cost? The answer was complicated. Yes, I wanted to lead Hartwell. I had ideas about where the company needed to go, strategies for emerging markets, plans for digital transformation that would position us for the next 20 years. I could do the job. I could do it well. But taking it meant confirming every fear my father had about me. It meant being the aggressive daughter who overstepped, who didn't know her place, who embarrassed the family by reaching too high. Or maybe it meant finally accepting that his approval wasn't mine to win, that I'd been chasing something that was never going to be offered, no matter what I accomplished. I closed my laptop and gathered my things. The drive home took 40 minutes through late evening traffic. My apartment was dark and quiet, just me and my thoughts and the city lights spread out below my windows. I made tea I didn't drink and sat on the couch, staring at nothing. My phone rang at 9:30. Patricia Morrison, one of the board members Robert had mentioned. Lillian, I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all, Patricia. What can I do for you? Robert told me he spoke with you this afternoon about the CEO position. Patricia had been on Hartwell's board for 12 years. She ran her own private equity firm and had a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthlessly pragmatic. I wanted to add my voice to his. You'd have my full support. I appreciate that. I also wanted you to know that David Huang and I have been building a coalition among the board members. We have 7 confirmed votes for your appointment as of tonight. That's a clear majority, 11, more than Robert had mentioned this afternoon. Who's the 7th? I asked. James Thornton came around this evening after reviewing your performance metrics again. He's particularly impressed with how you've managed stakeholder relationships during the Meridian integration. Patricia paused. The opposition is softening, Lillian. Douglas Patterson interviewed with the search committee yesterday, and he didn't impress them. Too focused on short-term stock price, not enough vision for sustainable growth. What about the concerns that I'm too young, too inexperienced? You're 38, Robert was 42 when he became CEO. As for experience, you've run operations for 3 divisions, led 2 major acquisitions, and restructured half the company. That's more relevant experience than most external candidates have. Her voice sharpened. The age and experience objections are covers for the real issue, which is that some people don't like the idea of a woman CEO, but those people are dinosaurs, and they're going to lose this vote. My father is one of those people. Yes, he is. Patricia didn't sugarcoat it. Gerald's been making calls, trying to rally opposition, but here's what you need to understand, Lillian. Your father had a good career at Hartwell, but he was never executive leadership material. He hit his ceiling at COO, and that's where he stayed for 15 years. He doesn't have the vision or the strategic thinking that you have. The board knows that. It should have felt good to hear, but it just felt sad. My father had devoted his entire adult life to this company, and in the end, the board saw him as someone who'd hit his ceiling. I need time to think about this, I told Patricia. Of course. But Lillian, don't let your father's insecurities become your limitations. You've earned this. Take it. After she hung up, I sat in the dark and thought about everything that had led to this moment. Every late night, every difficult decision, every time I'd swallowed my frustration and played the political game. Every time I'd been underestimated and worked twice as hard to prove myself. Every time I'd been told I was too aggressive, too ambitious, too much. And I thought about Saturday night, my father's retirement party at the Grand Monarch Hotel, 300 guests celebrating his 41 years of service, his legacy, his moment, and me, uninvited, erased, not welcome to share in the celebration of a career spent at the company I might soon be leading. The irony was so sharp, it almost made me laugh. Almost. Wednesday morning arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. I'd slept maybe 4 hours, my mind churning through scenarios and consequences until dawn crept through my bedroom windows. At 7:30, I was back at my desk, reviewing the latest market analysis reports. If I was going to make a decision about the CEO position, I needed to understand exactly what I'd be walking into. The coffee was bitter and strong, the way I preferred it when facing difficult decisions. My assistant Karen arrived at 8 with an unusual request. There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she said it's important. Who? Vivian Rodriguez. She said you'd know her. I did know her. Vivian Rodriguez was a legend in the manufacturing sector. She'd been CEO of Continental Manufacturing for 12 years before retiring last year. She'd also been the first Latina CEO of a Fortune 500 industrial company. We'd met twice at industry conferences where she'd offered advice I'd been smart enough to take. Send her in. Vivian walked into my office with the confident stride of someone who'd spent decades commanding boardrooms. She was in her mid-60s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her silver hair cut short and professional. Lillian Wilson, you look like you haven't slept. Good morning to you too, Vivian. I stood and shook her hand. What brings you to Hartwell? You. She settled into the chair across from my desk without waiting for an invitation. Patricia Morrison called me last night, told me about the CEO situation and your father's campaign against you. Of course, Patricia had called her. Patricia and Vivian had served on several boards together. I'm not sure what you want me to say, I replied carefully. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to listen. Vivian leaned forward. 23 years ago, I was in your exact position. Different company, different industry, but the same essential problem. The board wanted to promote me to CEO. I was qualified, had the track record, had the strategic vision. And my mentor, the man who'd hired me, who'd sponsored my career for 15 years, lobbied against my appointment. Why not? Because I threatened the world he understood. Because seeing his protege surpass him meant confronting his own limitations. Because transformation is terrifying to people who've built their identity on the old way of doing things. Vivian's eyes were sharp with remembered pain. He told the board I was too aggressive, too risky, that I'd alienate the customer base. Sound familiar? It sounded exactly like what my father was saying about me. What did you do? I took the job anyway, and for the first 2 years he made my life hell. Talked to journalists about my decisions, stirred up resistance among old clients, poisoned relationships with industry partners. Vivian paused. But here's what I learned. His opposition wasn't about me, it was about him, about his fear of irrelevance, about his inability to accept that the world had moved on. How did you get past it? I stopped trying to prove myself to him. I stopped caring whether he approved. I focused on the work, on the results, on building the company I knew we could become. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. He never did come around. He went to his grave believing I'd ruined his legacy. But Continental Manufacturing tripled in value under my leadership, and we became an industry leader in sustainable manufacturing. His opinion of me didn't change those facts. I thought about my father, about his 41 years at Hartwell, about the legacy he'd built, and the fear that I might somehow tarnish it. Your father is retiring, Vivian continued. His story at Hartwell is ending. The question is whether you're going to let his ending prevent your beginning. We talked for another hour. Vivian laid out the realities of being a woman CEO in a male-dominated industry with brutal honesty. The scrutiny would be relentless. Every decision would be questioned more harshly than if I were a man. I'd be held to a different standard, have to work twice as hard for half the credit. The loneliness of the position would be profound. But she also talked about the opportunity, the chance to shape a company's direction, the ability to implement vision at scale, the satisfaction of proving that different didn't mean lesser, that transformation was possible. Take the job, Lillian, she said as she stood to leave. Not to prove your father wrong, not to validate yourself, but because you're the right person for it, and you know it. After Vivian left, I pulled up the strategic plan I'd been developing for months, a comprehensive roadmap for Hartwell's next 5 years. Digital transformation, emerging market expansion, sustainable manufacturing initiatives, workforce development programs. I'd created it as a thought exercise, never imagining I'd be in position to implement it. But here I was. My phone rang. Marcus. Hey, he said. You got a minute? Sure. I'm downstairs. Can I come up? 5 minutes later, my brother was sitting in my office, looking uncomfortable in his product development department polo shirt and khakis. Marcus had always been more casual than me, less interested in climbing the corporate ladder and more focused on the technical work he loved. Dad's been calling me nonstop, he said without preamble. He knows about the CEO situation. How? Someone on the board told him. Probably Harold Jenkins. They golfed together. Marcus ran his hand through his hair. Lil, he's furious. I've never seen him this angry. Because the board might promote me. Because he thinks you're forcing yourself into a position you're not ready for. Because he believes it'll hurt the company. Marcus looked miserable. And because he thinks you're deliberately trying to overshadow his retirement. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. His retirement party is Saturday. The board vote is Friday. The timing has nothing to do with me. I know that, but Dad's convinced you somehow orchestrated this, that you manipulated Robert Chen into retiring early just to create an opening. Marcus held up his hands. I'm not saying I believe that. I'm telling you what he's saying. What do you think, Marcus? He was quiet for a long moment. I think you're brilliant at your job. I think the changes you've made have been necessary, even if they've upset people. I think you see the business landscape more clearly than anyone else in this building. But I also think you're about to blow up our family. His voice cracked slightly. If you take this job, Dad will never forgive you. He'll see it as the ultimate betrayal, and Mom will be caught in the middle, trying to keep the peace like she always does. So I should turn down the CEO position to keep family peace? I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to understand what you're choosing. Marcus leaned forward. Lil, I love you. You're my sister. But I also watched what happened when you got promoted to EVP. Dad stopped talking to you for 3 months. He told people you'd gotten the position through gender quotas, not merit. It was ugly, I remembered. 3 months of silence. 3 months of my mother making excuses for him. 3 months of family dinners I wasn't invited to. If you become CEO, it won't be 3 months, Biscuits, Marcus continued. It'll be permanent. He'll never accept it, never acknowledge your success. You'll lose him. I already have lost him, I said quietly. He uninvited me from his retirement party, Marcus, his own daughter, because I'm an embarrassment to his legacy. He's scared. He's been scared my entire career. At some point, his fear stops being my problem. Marcus stood up. Just think about what you're doing, okay? Once you cross this line, there's no going back. After he left, I sat in the silence of my office and thought about lines, about the ones I'd already crossed and the ones still ahead, about the family I might lose and the future I might gain. At noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Helen Bradford. Patricia Morrison gave me your number. I was Hartwell's first female VP back in 1998. Heard about your situation. Would love to buy you lunch if you have time. I've been where you are. I stared at the message. Helen, Bradford. I knew the name. She'd been a rising star at Hartwell, left abruptly in 2002, and went on to become CFO of another company. I'd never known why she left. I texted back. Noon tomorrow? Her response came immediately. Perfect. Angela's downtown. I'll make a reservation. The rest of Wednesday passed in a blur of meetings and decisions. The Meridian integration was progressing smoothly. The Pacific Division's quarterly numbers were strong. The European team had just closed a major contract with a German manufacturer. The business was working. My strategies were working. At 7 p.m., I received an email from Robert Chen. Board meeting confirmed for Friday, 9 a.m. Need your decision by Thursday, 8 p.m. at the latest. Whatever you decide, you have my respect. Robert. Thursday morning, I met Helen Bradford at Angelo's, a quiet Italian restaurant 3 blocks from Hartwell's headquarters. She was in her late 50s, with sharp eyes and an easy confidence that came from decades of navigating corporate politics. You have the same look I did 23 years ago, she said after we'd ordered, caught between ambition and family loyalty. Patricia said you'd been in my position. Close enough. The board wanted to promote me to SVP of Operations in 2002, would have made me the highest-ranking woman in company history at that time. Helen sipped her water. My father-in-law worked at Hartwell, 30 years in manufacturing operations. He lobbied hard against my promotion, said it would be inappropriate for a woman to supervise men in factory settings, said I should focus on my young children instead of chasing executive titles. What happened? I withdrew my name from consideration. Helen's expression was hard to read. Told myself I was being practical, that family harmony mattered more than career advancement, that I could wait a few more years. But you left the company. 2 years later, because once I'd signaled I'd put family expectations over my own ambitions, I was done. They never considered me for promotion. Again, I'd shown them I could be managed, controlled, so I left and rebuilt my career somewhere else. She leaned forward. I don't regret leaving Hartwell, but I regret not taking that promotion when I had the chance. I let someone else's fears dictate my choices. Did your relationship with your father-in-law improve after you withdrew? No, he still thought I was too ambitious, too focused on career. All I accomplished by backing down was teaching him that his disapproval could control me. Helen's smile was bitter. Learn from my mistake, Lillian. If you turn down this position to appease your father, he won't suddenly respect you more. He'll just learn that he can veto your career whenever he decides you're reaching too high. We talked through lunch about the realities of executive leadership, about the specific challenges of being a woman CEO, about work-life balance and strategic priorities. Helen was generous with her experience and honest about her failures. One more thing, she said as we were leaving. Your father's retirement party on Saturday. Are you going? I'm not invited. Doesn't matter. Go anyway. Helen's eyes glinted. If you're going to take the CEO position, you need to signal that you're not intimidated, that you won't be erased. Show up. My father will have me removed. At his own retirement party, in front of 300 colleagues, he won't risk the scene. She squeezed my shoulder. Trust me. If you're about to become his boss's boss, he needs to see you as powerful, not as the dutiful daughter he can control. Showing up uninvited sends that message. I walked back to the office thinking about power and family, about respect and fear, about all the ways we let other people's expectations shape our choices. At 3 p.m., I had my quarterly review meeting with the executive leadership team. These meetings were usually routine, department updates, performance metrics, strategic alignment discussions. But today there was an unusual tension in the room. Everyone knew about the board meeting Friday. Everyone knew I was being considered for CEO. Graham Foster, SVP of Sales, cleared his throat. Before we begin, I want to say something. There's been a lot of speculation about leadership changes. Whatever the board decides, I want Lillian to know she has the sales team's full support. Around the table, heads nodded. Jennifer Park from marketing, Thomas Brewer from finance. Even David Sullivan from manufacturing, who'd been vocal critic of some of my restructuring decisions. The company's stronger because of the changes you've driven, Jennifer added. We know that. The teams know that. It was a small moment, but it cracked something open in my chest. I wasn't alone in this. The people actually doing the work, actually executing the vision, they understood what we were building. After the meeting, I went back to my office and pulled out a legal pad. Drew a line down the middle. On the left side, I wrote, accept, CEO position. On the right, decline, Under accept, lead. Transformation of Hartwell, implement, strategic vision, break. Glass ceiling. Prove capabilities, build something meaningful, but also permanent family rupture, father's active opposition, intense scrutiny, immense pressure, loneliness of command, under decline, maintain family peace, maybe, avoid conflict, stay in comfortable role, let external candidate lead. But also, always wonder, what if, signal, I can be controlled by disapproval, abandon strategic vision, let fear win, betrayal of capabilities. I stared at the lists for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called Robert Chen. Lillian, you have an answer? I do. My voice was steady. I accept. I want the CEO position. There was a pause, then, you're sure? I'm sure. Good. I could hear the smile in his voice. The board meets tomorrow at 9. I'll present you as my recommended successor. With 7 votes confirmed, the appointment should be straightforward. We'll make the public announcement next week, with transition beginning immediately. Robert, thank you for believing in me when others didn't. I'm not doing you a favor, Lillian. You're the best choice for this company's future. Now prove me right. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office and felt the weight of what I'd just committed to. CEO of Hartwell Industries, the youngest in company history, the first woman. My father's worst fear realized. And on Saturday, his retirement party, where I would walk in uninvited and face whatever came next. I pulled up my calendar and blocked off Saturday evening. Then I called my stylist and asked her to send over options for a black tie event. If I was going to crash my father's retirement party, I was going to look like the CEO I was about to become. Friday morning broke cold and clear. I arrived at Hartwell headquarters at 6:30 a.m., 2.5 hours before the board meeting that would determine the company's future leadership. The building was nearly empty, just security guards and the early bird janitors finishing their overnight shift. In my office, I reviewed the transition documents Robert's assistant had sent over at midnight. Assuming the board voted in my favor, there would be a compressed timeline. Formal announcement to employees today at noon, press release by end of business, investor call Monday morning, and transition planning sessions throughout the next 2 weeks. Robert would stay on for 90 days as special advisor, but effective immediately, I would be CEO. My hands were steady as I reviewed the documents. No nervousness, no second guessing, just clarity. At 8:15, Robert's assistant called. The board members are gathering in the executive conference room. Mr. Chen asked if you could come up at 8:45. I'll be there. I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Somewhere down there, my father was probably having his morning coffee, completely unaware that in less than an hour, his worst fear would be realized. Tomorrow night was his retirement party. Today was the day his daughter became CEO of the company he'd served for 41 years. The irony was almost poetic. At 8:45 precisely, I took the elevator to the 45th floor. The executive conference room was at the end of a long hallway lined with portraits of every Hartwell CEO since the company's founding in 1938. Soon, my portrait would hang there. The first woman among 11 men. Robert met me outside the conference room. They're ready. This should be straightforward. Patricia has done excellent coalition building work, but there will be questions. Just answer honestly and with confidence. I understand. One more thing. He lowered his voice. Harold Jenkins received a call from your father this morning. Last-ditch effort to swing votes. Harold told him it was inappropriate to lobby against his own daughter and refused to discuss it further. Something twisted in my stomach. My father had called board members this morning, the morning of the vote, still fighting to prevent my appointment. Lillian, Robert's voice was gentle. Don't let it shake you. Gerald's opinion doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what happens in that room. I nodded and followed him inside. The boardroom was elegant and intimidating, floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive mahogany table, leather chairs, and those portraits of past CEOs watching from the walls. 11 board members sat around the table, each with tablets and documents in front of them. Patricia Morrison smiled at me from across the table. David Huang gave a slight nod. Harold Jenkins, who'd apparently rejected my father's morning lobbying, looked stern but not hostile. The opposition sat on the far side. 3 older men who'd been on the board for decades and seemed uncomfortable with any change that challenged their worldview. Thank you for joining us, Lillian, Robert said formally. Please have a seat. I sat in the empty chair at the end of the table, directly across from Robert. We've called you here this morning because the board has been conducting a comprehensive review of CEO succession planning, Robert continued. As you know, I'll be retiring at the end of the fiscal year. The search committee has evaluated both internal and external candidates. This morning, we'll be making our final decision. He turned to Patricia. Patricia, as chair of the search committee, would you present your findings? Patricia stood and pulled up a presentation on the large screen behind her. Over the past 6 months, our committee has evaluated 12 candidates, 8 external executives with CEO experience, and 4 internal candidates at the EVP level or above. She clicked through slides showing evaluation criteria: strategic vision, operational excellence, financial acumen, change management capability, stakeholder relationship skills, and cultural fit. Among external candidates, we found several qualified individuals. However, none demonstrated the deep understanding of Hartwell's market position, operational complexities, and transformation needs that we require at this critical juncture. Next slide. Performance metrics for internal candidates. My numbers stood out sharply. European division turnaround, Meridian acquisition success, operational cost savings, revenue growth in my divisions. Among internal candidates, one executive stands out with exceptional clarity. Patricia looked directly at me. Lillian Wilson has demonstrated strategic vision, execution capability, and transformation leadership that position her as the optimal choice to lead Hartwell into its next chapter. Harold Jenkins raised his hand. Patricia, I want to address the elephant in the room. Ms. Wilson is 38 years old. Some might argue that's too young for CEO responsibility at a company of this size and complexity. Fair question, Patricia replied. Let me address that with data. When Robert Chen became CEO 17 years ago, he was 42. When Thomas Pemberton led Hartwell through its public offering in 1993, he was 39. Age alone is not a disqualifier. Capability is what matters. David Huang spoke up. I'd add that in today's rapidly changing business environment, we need a CEO who understands digital transformation, emerging markets, and new competitive dynamics. Lillian's age is actually an asset. She's navigated her entire career in the modern business landscape. One of the opposition members, Edward Walsh, leaned forward. What about the concern that Ms. Wilson's management style is too aggressive? That she's alienated important stakeholders? Robert fielded that one. Edward, let's be specific. The aggressive label has been applied to decisions that were ultimately correct and profitable. The Syntec merger that supposedly upset traditionalists? It's exceeded performance targets by 18%. The Pacific Division restructuring that eliminated redundant positions? It saved the company $42 million annually while actually improving productivity. When we examine the substance rather than the style complaints, we find a track record of sound judgment and excellent results. There's also been feedback from Gerald Wilson, Edward persisted. He's expressed serious reservations about this appointment. The room went very quiet. Patricia's voice was ice. Gerald Wilson is a retiring COO, not a board member. His personal opinions about internal candidates are not relevant to our decision-making process. Moreover, his obvious conflict of interest, this candidate is his daughter, makes his input particularly suspect. I think it's important we hear from Lillian directly, Harold Jenkins said, turning to me. Ms. Wilson, you're aware that this appointment would make you the youngest CEO in Hartwell's history and the first woman to hold this position. You're also aware that your father has opposed your candidacy. How do you respond to concerns that you're not ready for this responsibility? I met his gaze steadily. I understand the concerns about my age and experience level. I also understand that breaking new ground always generates resistance. But let me be clear about what I bring to this position. I've successfully led operational turnarounds in 3 divisions. I've negotiated and integrated a major acquisition. I've implemented cost-saving measures that improved our competitive position without sacrificing quality or capability. I've built relationships with key customers, suppliers, and industry partners across 6 continents. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. As for my father's opposition, I respect his right to his opinion, but his concerns are based on a fundamental disagreement about what Hartwell needs. He believes the company should maintain traditional approaches and avoid significant change. I believe we need to transform or risk becoming irrelevant in a rapidly evolving market. The data supports transformation. Our competitors who've embraced change are gaining market share. Those who've resisted are declining. You're saying your father is wrong, Edward Walsh challenged. I'm saying we have different visions for Hartwell's future. His vision served the company well for many years. but the business landscape has changed, and our strategy must change with it. I looked around the table. If you appoint me as CEO, I will lead that transformation with the same rigor and discipline I've brought to every role I've held. I will make decisions based on data and strategic necessity, not on what's comfortable or familiar. And I will prove that capability matters more than age, gender, or anyone's preconceived notions about who should lead. Patricia smiled slightly. David Huang nodded. Even Harold Jenkins looked satisfied with the answer. Robert checked his watch. Unless there are other questions for Ms. Wilson, I suggest we move to executive session for our vote. No one spoke. Thank you, Lillian. We'll notify you of our decision shortly. I stood, nodded to the board, and walked out with as much dignity as I could muster. My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression neutral until I was back in my office. Then I sat down and waited. 27 minutes later, my phone rang. Robert Chen. Congratulations, CEO Wilson. The vote was 8-3. You'll receive formal notification within the hour, and we'll make the company-wide announcement at noon. 8-3, a clear mandate. Thank you, Robert. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Now the real work begins. The next 4 hours were a whirlwind. HR Director Angela Torres arrived with employment contracts and confidentiality agreements. Legal counsel briefed me on fiduciary responsibilities and regulatory requirements. Robert's assistant coordinated the logistics for the noon announcement and the press release. Own assistant Karen fielded a dozen calls from executives and department heads who'd heard rumors and wanted confirmation. At 11:45, I stood in the bathroom on the 42nd floor, checking my appearance in the mirror. Navy suit, white blouse, minimal jewelry. I looked professional, competent, ready. I looked like a CEO. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Just heard from someone on the board. Is it true? I typed back yes, official announcement at noon. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Congratulations, Lil. You earned it. Dad's going to lose his mind. I know. Call me later? Tomorrow, after the party. At noon precisely, I walked into the main auditorium where Robert had assembled all headquarters staff. 400 employees filled the seats, their faces curious and speculative. News had leaked, but nothing was confirmed yet. Robert stood at the podium. Thank you all for gathering on short notice. As many of you know, I've been planning my retirement for some time. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the board has selected my successor as CEO of Hartwell Industries. He paused for effect. It gives me tremendous pride to introduce your new Chief Executive Officer, Lillian Wilson. The applause was immediate and genuine. I walked onto the stage and shook Robert's hand, then turned to face the assembled staff. Thank you for that warm welcome, I began. I'm honored by the board's confidence and humbled by the responsibility. Hartwell Industries has an 87-year history of innovation, quality, and integrity. My goal is to honor that legacy while positioning us for sustained success in an evolving marketplace. I spoke for 10 minutes about vision, values, and the road ahead, about respecting what made us strong while embracing necessary change, about the talented people who made Hartwell great and how we'd work together to build the future. The speech went well. Afterwards, dozens of people approached to offer congratulations. Graham Foster from sales, Jennifer Park from marketing, even some faces I didn't recognize, people from accounting, operations, product, development, all expressing support and excitement. At 2 p.m., the press release went live. My phone exploded with texts and calls, industry colleagues, former McKinsey partners, business school classmates. Everyone wanted to congratulate me or offer commentary. One call stood out. My mother. Lillian? Her voice was strained. I just saw the news. Your father is... He's very upset. I imagine he is. Why didn't you tell us you were being considered? Would it have changed anything, Mom? Silence. We both knew the answer. He's saying you deliberately orchestrated this to embarrass him, that you timed it to overshadow his retirement. She sounded exhausted. He wants me to call you and tell you not to come to the party tomorrow. He already uninvited me on Tuesday, but now it's different. Now you're CEO. He says if you show up, he'll have security remove you. I closed my eyes. Even now, even after everything, it still hurt to hear. Tell Dad that I'll be at the Grand Monarch Hotel tomorrow at 7 p.m. Tell him I'll stay for the CEO's speech and toast, then I'll leave quietly. But I'm not hiding. Not anymore. Lillian, please, don't make this worse. I'm not making anything worse, Mom. I'm just refusing to be erased. I softened my voice. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow night. I hung up before she could respond. The rest of Friday passed in strategic planning sessions and transition meetings. Robert walked me through key relationships, pending decisions, and sensitive situations requiring CEO attention. By 7 p.m., my brain was overloaded with information and my emotional reserves were depleted. I went home, ordered takeout I barely touched, and laid out my dress for tomorrow's event. It was a deep emerald green, striking, elegant, impossible to ignore. When I walked into that ballroom, everyone would know exactly who I was. That night, I slept better than I had all week. The decision was made. The path was set. Tomorrow, I would walk into my father's retirement party as the CEO of Hartwell Industries, uninvited but unafraid. Whatever happened next, I was ready. Saturday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. I spent the afternoon in quiet preparation, hair styled in an elegant updo, makeup subtle but polished. The emerald green dress fitted perfectly. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who belonged in that ballroom, someone who had every right to be there. My driver arrived at 6:30. The Grand Monarch Hotel was downtown, a landmark building with gilded columns and crystal chandeliers that had hosted presidential dinners and Fortune 500 galas for over a century. As we pulled up to the entrance, I could see other guests arriving, men in tuxedos, women in evening gowns, everyone dressed for the occasion. I checked my phone one last time. A text from Patricia Morrison. Robert's speech is scheduled for 8:15. Be there. Another from Helen Bradford. Walk in like you own the place, because soon you will. Nothing from my family. I stepped out of the car at 6:58. The doorman held the entrance open, and I walked through the marble lobby toward the Imperial Ballroom where my father's retirement celebration was being held. The ballroom doors were flanked by registration tables where Hartwell employees checked guests in. I recognized one of them, Sandra from corporate events, who'd helped coordinate dozens of company functions I'd attended over the years. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Ms. Wilson, I don't have you on the guest list. I know, but I'm the CEO of Hartwell Industries as of yesterday. I should be on every list. I kept my voice, pleasant but firm. Is there a problem? Sandra glanced nervously at her colleague, then back at me. Mr. Gerald Wilson specifically requested that you not be admitted. I understand, but Robert Chen, who's giving the keynote speech tonight, specifically invited me. So unless you want to explain to the current CEO why you barred the incoming CEO from a company event, I suggest you let me through. The logic was unassailable. Sandra hesitated for another moment, then stepped aside. Of course, Ms. Wilson. Enjoy the evening. I walked through the doors into a scene of elegant celebration. The Imperial Ballroom was spectacular. 3 massive crystal chandeliers, gold leaf molding on 20-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows draped in burgundy velvet. Round tables draped in white linens filled the space, each centered with elaborate floral arrangements. A small orchestra played soft jazz in the corner. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. 300 people in formal attire mingled and laughed, celebrating 41 years of my father's career. I recognized faces from throughout Hartwell's leadership, department heads, regional managers, senior executives. Old colleagues my father had worked alongside for decades, their spouses and partners. A few board members, though I noted that Patricia, David Huang, and several others who'd voted for me were conspicuously absent. They'd likely been uninvited, just as I had. The room's energy was warm, convivial. Then someone noticed me. The conversation near the entrance faltered, then spread. Like ripples across water, awareness of my presence moved through the ballroom. Heads turned, whispers started. The easy laughter took on an edge of tension. I kept my head high and walked toward the bar. If I was going to stand through this, I needed a drink. White wine, please, I told the bartender. Lillian. I turned to find Graham Foster, my SVP of sales, standing beside me with his wife. His expression was warm. Graham, good to see you. Congratulations on the appointment. Well deserved. He glanced around the room. This is going to be interesting. That's one word for it. His wife Teresa touched my arm gently. You look beautiful. That dress is stunning. Thank you. Other people approached, some to congratulate me on the CEO position, others simply curious about the drama unfolding. I fielded questions with practiced diplomacy, neither apologizing for my presence nor explaining myself. I was here. That was enough. Then I saw my brother making his way through the crowd. Marcus looked stressed. his bow tie slightly askew. "Lil, what are you doing here?" "Attending a company event celebrating a retiring executive." "Dad is furious. He saw you come in. He's talking about having security escort you out." "Then let him try. I'd love to see how that plays with 300 witnesses and half the business press." I sipped my wine. "How's Mom?" "Stressed, trying to keep Dad calm. She's worried this is going to turn into a scene." "I'm not making a scene, Marcus. I'm standing here having a glass of wine. If anyone creates a scene, it won't be me." He ran, his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. "Look, I get why you're doing this. I do. But Dad's retirement party isn't the place." "When would be the place?" I interrupted gently. "When would it be acceptable for me to exist in the same space as our father? When would my accomplishments stop being an embarrassment to him?" Marcus had no answer. I saw my mother across the room, standing with a group of other executives' wives. She looked elegant in a navy gown, but her face was strained. Our eyes met. She gave me a small, sad smile, then looked away. Not taking sides. Never taking sides. At 7:45, dinner was served. I found myself without a seat. I wasn't on the seating chart, obviously. Graham and Teresa insisted I join their table, which already had 8 people, but made room for a 9th chair. The conversation was carefully neutral, everyone aware of the elephant in the room, but too polite to address it directly. I noticed my father at the head table near the podium. He sat rigid in his chair, his jaw tight, refusing to look in my direction. Next to him, my mother picked at her food. Marcus sat on his other side, leaning in occasionally to say something that my father ignored. Robert Chen was at the head table too, along with several other senior executives and their spouses. Robert caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Dinner concluded at 8:10. The lights dimmed slightly, and the orchestra stopped playing. A Hartwell VP I didn't know well, someone from operations, approached the podium. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Brennan, and I've had the privilege of working with Gerald Wilson for the past 19 years. Tonight, we're here to celebrate an extraordinary career spanning more than 4 decades of dedication, innovation, and leadership." The speech was warm and sincere, highlighting my father's accomplishments, his role in modernizing manufacturing processes in the 90s, his leadership during the difficult restructuring of 2008, his mentorship of countless younger employees, the stability he'd brought to operations year after year. All true, all legitimate achievements. But listening to the recitation of his career, I was struck by something Michael didn't say. There was no mention of transformation, no discussion of innovation or vision for the future. My father's career had been about maintaining, optimizing, stabilizing. Important work, but fundamentally conservative. Michael concluded his remarks and introduced Robert Chen. "And now, I'd like to invite our CEO, Robert Chen, to say a few words about Gerald's legacy and the future of Hartwell Industries." The room applauded as Robert approached the podium. He looked distinguished in his tuxedo, commanding the space with the ease of someone who'd led for 17 years. "Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for being here tonight." Robert's voice carried clearly through the ballroom. "Gerald Wilson represents the best of Hartwell Industries. His commitment, his work ethic, his dedication to excellence. These are the values that have defined this company since Thomas Hartwell founded it 87 years ago." More applause. My father's expression softened slightly at the praise. Gerald joined Hartwell in 1982, fresh out of grad school with a mechanical engineering degree and a determination to make his mark. Over 41 years, he did exactly that. He helped us navigate technological transitions, economic downturns, competitive pressures, and changing market dynamics. His steady hand kept our operations running smoothly, even during the most turbulent times. Robert paused, his expression growing more serious. But tonight isn't just about celebrating the past. It's also about looking toward the future. Because while we honor Gerald's legacy, we must also acknowledge that Hartwell stands at a crossroads. The industrial manufacturing landscape is evolving rapidly. Digital transformation, automation, sustainability requirements, emerging market competition, these forces demand new approaches, new strategies, and new leadership. I felt the energy in the room shift, people leaning forward, sensing something significant coming. Yesterday, the Hartwell Industries Board of Directors made a historic decision. After months of comprehensive evaluation, interviewing external candidates and assessing internal talent, the board voted 8-3 to appoint our next CEO. My father's head snapped up. His eyes found Robert's, and I saw confusion, then dawning realization cross his face. It gives me tremendous pride to announce that effective immediately, Hartwell Industries will be led by a visionary executive who has consistently demonstrated strategic brilliance, operational excellence, and transformative leadership. Robert's voice grew stronger. Someone who turned around our failing European division in 18 months. Someone who negotiated and integrated the Meridian acquisition that expanded our market position by 18%. Someone who has saved this company over $200 million through smart restructuring while actually improving productivity and employee satisfaction. My heart was pounding. Around me, I could feel people turning to look in my direction. Someone who represents not just Hartwell's future, but the future of industrial leadership. Younger, more innovative, unafraid to challenge conventional wisdom. Robert smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Hartwell Industries' new Chief Executive Officer, Lillian Wilson. The spotlight swung to where I sat. For a moment, the room was completely silent. That breathless pause between revelation and reaction. Then the applause started. Graham Foster was on his feet immediately, clapping enthusiastically. Teresa beside him, Jennifer Park, from marketing standing and applauding, one by one throughout. The ballroom, people rose and clapped. Not everyone. I could see pockets of resistance, people sitting with crossed arms or clapping reluctantly. But enough. More than enough. I stood and walked toward the podium, my emerald green dress catching the light. Every eye in the room tracked my progress. I could feel the weight of judgment, speculation, resentment, and admiration all mixed together. When I reached the podium, Robert shook my hand firmly and stepped aside. I stood facing 300 people at my father's retirement party, the newly announced CEO of the company he'd devoted his life to. I found my father in the crowd. He sat frozen in his chair, his face drained of color. My mother had her hand on his arm, but he seemed not to notice. Marcus stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shock, certainly, but also something that might have been pride. Thank you, Robert, and thank you all for that warm welcome. My voice was steady, projecting confidence I mostly felt. I want to begin by acknowledging what tonight is truly about. Celebrating Gerald Wilson's 41 years of dedicated service to Hartwell Industries. I looked directly at my father. My father built his career on principles of excellence, integrity, and commitment. He showed up every day, tackled every challenge, and never took the easy path when the right path was harder. Those values shaped not just his work, but his family. They shaped me. Something flickered in my father's expression. Gerald Wilson taught me, perhaps without meaning to, that success requires sacrifice. That leadership means making unpopular decisions, that you can't please everyone, so you might as well do what you believe is right. I paused. Those lessons have served me well in my career. They'll continue to serve me as I lead Hartwell into our next chapter. I turned to address the broader room. The industrial manufacturing sector is at an inflection point. Companies that adapt will thrive. Companies that cling to past approaches will decline. Hartwell Industries will adapt. We'll embrace digital transformation while honoring the engineering excellence that built this company. We'll expand into emerging markets while maintaining the customer relationships that sustain us. We'll innovate boldly while remaining grounded in the values that define us. The applause was stronger this time, more genuine. People responding not just to the announcement, but to the vision. Change is uncomfortable, I know that. Some of you in this room have concerns about my leadership, my age, my experience, my approach. That's fair. I'm asking you to judge me not on preconceptions, but on results. Give me a year. If Hartwell isn't stronger, more competitive, more profitable at the end of that year, then your concerns were valid. I smiled. But I don't think that's what you'll find. More applause. Graham was grinning. Jennifer was nodding enthusiastically. Even some of the skeptical faces had softened. Tonight, we celebrate Gerald Wilson's legacy. Starting Monday, we build Hartwell's future. Thank you. I stepped away from the podium to sustained applause. Robert met me with a warm handshake and whispered, "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." As I walked back through the ballroom, people approached to offer congratulations, ask questions, express cautious optimism. The mood had shifted. Whatever tensions my uninvited presence had created, the official announcement had reframed everything. I wasn't the difficult daughter crashing her father's party. I was the CEO attending a company event. Finally, I made my way to the head table. My father still sat in his chair, but his expression had transformed from shock to something colder, harder. "Dad." He looked up at me. "You planned this. You orchestrated the timing to embarrass me at my own retirement party." The board made their decision Friday. I had no control over when Robert chose to announce it. You could have asked him to wait. You could have let me have this one night. You uninvited me from this night, I reminded him gently. You told me I was an embarrassment, that my presence would upset your colleagues. And you came anyway, to prove a point. No, I came because I'm part of this company, because I refuse to be erased. I knelt down so we were at eye level. Dad, I didn't take this position to hurt you. I took it because I'm the best person for the job, because I can lead Hartwell into the future, because I've earned it. You've destroyed everything I worked for. The words were like a physical blow, but I'd learned over the past week that his opinions weren't facts. They were just his fears given voice. I'm going to prove you wrong, I said quietly. I'm going to lead this company to success, and maybe someday you'll be able to see that I didn't destroy your legacy. I built on it. I stood and walked away before he could respond. My mother caught up with me near the ballroom exit. Lillian, wait, I turned. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of mediating between two people who could never quite reach each other. I'm proud of you, she said softly. I want you to know that, even if I can't always show it the way you need me to. Thank you, Mom. Your father loves you. He's just scared, I know, but I can't make my life smaller to ease his fears. I touched her hand. I love you. Take care of him. I'll see you soon. I left the Grand Monarch Hotel at 8:45, 90 minutes after I'd arrived. The cool night air felt sharp and clean after the ballroom's intensity. My driver pulled up and I slid into the back seat, suddenly exhausted. My phone buzzed with messages. Patricia Morrison. Brilliant entrance, even better speech. Helen Bradford. You did it. Welcome to the CEO Club. Vivian Rodriguez. Watched the video Robert sent. You're going to be extraordinary. And one from Marcus. That took guts, Lil. Dad will come around. Maybe. Eventually. I hope. I leaned back and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Building coalitions, executing strategy, proving myself to skeptics, navigating the 1,000 challenges that came with leading a $4.2 billion company. But tonight, I'd walked into that ballroom uninvited and walked out as CEO. I'd faced my father's disappointment and refused to let it define me. I'd claimed my place at the table I'd earned. The city lights blurred past the windows as my driver navigated through evening traffic. Somewhere out there, other daughters were fighting similar battles, trying to prove themselves to fathers who couldn't see them clearly, navigating family dynamics that constrained their ambitions, choosing between approval and achievement. I hoped they chose achievement. I hoped they walked through the doors marked, "Not for you," anyway. I hoped they learned what I'd finally understood, that you can't earn validation from someone determined not to give it, and you don't need to. Your accomplishments speak for themselves. I was Lillian Wilson, CEO of Hartwell Industries, the uninvited daughter who showed up anyway and changed everything, and I was just getting started. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.